I have a tendency of stumbling into places where I don't belong. I can't help it. I'm just a curious fella. When I was in my teens, my curiosity manifested itself through trips to abandoned factories and shortcuts through finely manicured lawns. After a broken leg and a couple of trips in a squad car, my curiosity was tempered, but I would still get my kicks by squeezing myself into social events I wasn't invited to. I thought that sneaking into rap parties and the occasional housewarming would be a significantly safer alternative to urban exploration. I was wrong. It was a bit after 10 and there was a light drizzle in the air. Originally, I was meant to be grabbing a couple of drinks with a friend I haven't seen for a long time, but through stifled yawns and complaints about not getting enough sleep in med school, they brought the night to a premature close. The night was still young and I was still too sober. I roamed the streets and searched for trouble I could get myself into. A group of freshers, maybe a year or two younger than me, stood outside of an apartment and spoke in drunken whispers that weren't meant to attract the attention of the neighbors. Some of them smoked like regular addicts. Some puffed on their cigarettes as if they were cigars. But they all smoked. I asked for a light and soon enough was chatting with the tipsy crowd. The night was going fantastic. The drinks were strong and the music was groovy. The only real issue was that there was no balcony at the apartment, so all the smokers had to go down 5 flights of stairs whenever they were to satisfy their craving. I told them about the time my friend and I snuck into an abandoned munitions factory, and about how we had to climb up to the roof to feel safe lighting up. A very drunk member of the group who was severely underdressed for the weather kept on asking me if I wasn't scared, sneaking around an old building. I offered her my jacket and said the only thing I was scared of was lighting up a smoke around the smell of gunpowder. The real smokers had another cigarette, and those just trying it out shivered. When the group headed back inside of the apartment, I followed. By the sounds of it, all of them had met just a week or two prior, but I still got the gentlest of highs sneaking myself into their midst. The underdressed girl fumbled off my jacket and asked me if I was also a part of the Film and Television Society. Obviously I was, I said. Why else would I be at this party? A mountain of shoes that reeked of sweat sat right in front of the door, but once we threw our coats on the coat pile, the scent of the party became distinctly liquor-based. I made my way to the closest gathering of drinks, and poured myself a poor man's tequila sunrise. The whole gathering had the unmistakable ambiance of a freshers' party. Deafeningly loud in general, but quiet in corners. For a while I drank and floated around the different conversation circles, listening to people passionately recommend foreign TV series. The conversation wasn't particularly fascinating, but the rain had picked up outside and it was nice to be around people. At some point, a neighbor frantically buzzed on the door and insisted that it was late, and that the music should be turned down. Within 3 songs, someone had grown enamored enough with the tunes to blast them back to full volume. I had taken 2 vodka shots with a red-faced boy who looked straight out of high school. I found myself dancing along with the music. It wasn't particularly good, but the alcohol was catching up with me. I poured myself another tequila and juice, and made my way towards the kitchen to see if there was anything else floating around the party. The moment my feet touched tile, I stopped dancing. The atmosphere in the kitchen was radically different from the rest of the house party. No drug stuff was happening. No one was milling around the water tap or fridge. Instead, 2 middle-aged men and an elderly woman sat at the table. All 3 of them were oval in terms of body shape, and wore what looked like lab coats over their large bodies. Their skin was unhealthy to the point of grayness, and their eyes were a pinkish yellow. Exhaustion and something more nefarious seemed to have completely drained them of life. But the old woman managed a faint smile when I entered the kitchen.
"Excited for the tape?"
She croaked in my general direction. "Yes," I said. turning away from the trio. Very excited. I gathered my thoughts, refilled my drink, and slunk to the part of the party that didn't make me uncomfortable. There was a couple more buzzes at the door, but the volume of the music didn't change. Moving through the clumps of conversation, I managed to find out that the gathering was held for the premiere of some tape. Apparently, the strange grouping in the kitchen were the first to arrive at the party. No one had proper details. Most folks just came along because of the free booze. Drunkenly, though, people were getting excited about this mysterious tape. I must admit that I too found myself somewhat excited to see what this tape was. I found myself getting drunk too. I was enjoying the anticipation. Then, I bumped into a locked door. I had drank enough to get lost on my way to the bathroom. I found the line shortly after, but the thought had struck me. I was drunk at a party full of drunk strangers, and there was a locked door. While I waited to use the bathroom, I kept on thumbing the 2 bent paper clips in my pocket. After I finally managed to empty my bladder, I went back to the door. No one was watching, and it didn't take long. I picked the lock and went into the place where I wasn't meant to be. The moment the door closed behind me, the party simmered down into nothing but the throbbing bass of the music. I stood in a large bedroom with a couch and an old television in the center of the room. The air smelled like fresh sheets. Outside, the rain had turned violent. Right by the window, a fire escape shimmered and creaked beneath the wind of the storm. Just to prove to myself how comfortable I was, I stretched my legs on the couch, then strolled around to the bed and explored how soft it is. There was an iPhone on the dresser. Out of pure instinct, I snagged it. For a moment, I questioned the impulse, but then I just made sure the phone was off and looked around the room for other valuables. I found nothing of worth in the bedside drawers, and I was going to move on to the desk. But then I heard the door open. I slid under the bed like my life depended on it. Immediately, to calm my heartbeat, I started comparing my current predicament to almost getting caught in an old Soviet munitions factory. The heavy footfalls I heard were scarier than any post-Soviet security guard.
Soon, so very soon,
Gurgled one of the men from the kitchen.
we will see it all, so very soon.
Patience, friend.
Rasped the other.
If science has taught us anything, it is patience.
The 2 heavy men walked by the bed, and the scent of popcorn followed. My brain struggled against the layer of dust at my nose. I did my best to focus on the smell of food. The door to the party opened, letting in a torrent of music.
Are the snacks prepared?
The shrill woman asked.
Yes,
One of the gray men replied.
it is almost time.
The door closed. The steady heartbeat of bass went on for a couple more pumps, but then went quiet. The old woman was directing the group towards the bedroom with high-pitched screams. Fully aware of the 2 strange men a couple of feet away from me, I rolled to my side to avoid sneezing. Through the mirror, I could see the television and one of the oval men. His arms were disproportionately stubby to his body, and his fingers squirmed with excitement.
I can't wait.
He gurgled at his partner.
You will.
He gurgled back. Then, the door opened and the room started to fill with drunk teenagers. Occasionally, someone would yell about how excited they were to see the tape, but the old woman quickly shushed them. I was still stuck beneath the bed, but the anticipation was getting to me. We were all drunk and young, and a rowdy madness simmered in that room. The crowd amplified the legend of the tape, and the booze gave it edge. By the time the old lady waddled in front of the television, even though there must have been at least 30 of us in the room, everyone went silent.
Thank you for coming to this meeting of the Film and Television Society. It is now time for the tape.
The old woman's words provoked a drunken whisper that spread throughout the room. She shushed it with the authority of a schoolteacher.
You are not to speak during the playing of the tape. If you do, however, feel like laughing, this is permitted. This tape is meant to amuse and delight and educate. Now, with no further comments, I present to you Professor Egghead's Education Station.
A university lecture hall flickered onto the screen. The hall had the audience of a non-mandatory class, and from the few students that were there, most of them looked asleep. A couple, however, had their laptops open and were furiously typing notes.
I seem to have lost my words.
The lecturer was a short man with a scruffy goatee. Sweat was gathered on top of his bald head, and his eyes darted back and forth between the unenthused crowd.
I know I was meant to say something, but just give me a moment. Just let me find my place.
He spoke in a near whisper, but the microphone attached to his collar boomed his mumblings with an echo. Magnified above him loomed a PowerPoint presentation. The nervous lecturer cycled through the slides, looking for something. Back in the audience seats, the napping students started to wake up. The moment their eyes opened, they would grab their laptops and start furiously typing notes. No one in the lecture hall looked comfortable.
Ah, yes, the cat.
The lecturer breathed out a sigh of relief that hissed in the speakers above. A slide titled The Copenhagen Interpretation was projected onto the wall. Beneath the title, there was a picture of a film reel with a cat. The first 3 frames featured a simple picture of the cat, but then the reel split into 2 sources. The cat was alive in the first, and dead in the second one.
Okay, so we have the cat outside of the box. No, wait. The cat is inside of the box, but the box is... I don't think I can do this.
The students continued furiously typing their notes. Beneath the clattering of the keyboards and the lecturer's labored breathing, another sound arose. The applause of a studio audience.
I can't. Please, I can't do this anymore.
The lecturer pleaded with the students.
Please, if we all work together.
His words fell on deaf ears. The students kept on typing their notes and the applause kept on getting louder. The bald man looked up to the PowerPoint presentation and wept.
The cat is in the box. The cat is not in the box. The box is... I can't do this anymore. I give up.
The doors flew open, and a nightmare leapt into the lecture hall.
I am Professor Egghead, the Emperor of all universities, the Headmaster of all knowledge. I am Professor Egghead, and this man is an imposter.
This Professor Egghead looked much like the gray-skinned strangers I met in the kitchen, but where their bodies were misshapen with weight, his was completely inhuman. He was shaped like an egg with a horribly tired face, with diseased eyes and sharp teeth. A lab coat stretched across his malproportioned body, and he gripped a large, colorful mallet in his stubby fingers.
Please, I beg you. I don't want this anymore. I have a family.
The lecturer begged.
Just let me go. Let all of us go. We have done this for long.
The Egghead's mallet looked like something out of a cartoon, but it met the lecturer's forehead with the bluntness of a snuff film. Within 3 savage hits, the lecturer no longer had a face. The studio audience found this show of brutality to be absolutely hilarious. The students in the lecture hall were terrified. They stopped typing. The lecture hall had stared on in horror as the egg-shaped nightmare continued to assault the teacher.
I have unthroned this false prophet!
The Egghead screamed victoriously, sending thick chunks of spittle across the room.
Look at me! I am the teacher now!
The students on the television started to type again. The drunk freshers in the bedroom began to grow uneasy. For a moment, my view of the television screen was obstructed by figures moving in the darkness of the mirror. A couple of the drunk teenagers had seen enough of the tape and wanted out. The moment they started to move, a series of boos came from the studio audience.
You there! Sit back down!
The Egghead screamed from the television. The drunk freshers trying to move through the room stopped.
Yes! You there in the darkness! Go back to where you were! I am the academic equivalent of a baron. You will not disrespect me during my own lecture. Sit down.
A deafening round of applause came from the television. The figures in the darkness sat back down where they were. I once again had full view of the television. A pair of bloodshot eyes stared back into the camera, but something felt off. It felt like the Egghead was looking specifically at me. As if out of instinct, my eyes drifted to the dusty floor.
Good.
The creature's voice softened.
Now that everyone is seated and taking notes, it is time to introduce you to the field of which I hold dominion over. Science. There have been lies printed in the press about my kingdom. Propaganda by enemies both foreign and domestic, meant to instill a false sense of security. Being a scientist is not cool. Being a scientist is not fun. Being a scientist is not rewarding. To submit your body to science is to stare into the unknown and surrender all hope.
The studio audience praised Professor Egghead's monologue with a round of applause. The person sitting on the top of the bed that I was hiding under shifted uncomfortably. I found myself watching the television once more. There was something horribly wrong with the Egghead creature, and I kept wanting to look away, but I'm a curious fella. I couldn't help myself. Professor Egghead had taken over the PowerPoint presentation. The title of the slide was Lies About Science, and featured pictures of smiling scientists and lab technicians. Professor Egghead stared at the cheery pictures as if they were an affront to God. He spat on the wall, leaving behind a sliding splatter of milky brown.
Do not believe the media. Science is suffering. Science is pain. To illustrate my point, I will present a picture we cannot comprehend.
Ceremonially, the Egghead extended the PowerPoint controller and pressed his stubby finger on the next slide button. The whole room of freshers erupted in screams, I averted my eyes as soon as I could, but even the mere glimpse of what was on the screen made me stifle a cry of my own. I stared at the floor and tried to clear my mind, yet the afterimage remained. A mess of inhuman eyes and strands of flesh and arteries. The rest of the room continued screaming. The freshers were trying to escape, but something was in their way.
Yes! Yes! This is the sound of science!
The Egghead screamed from the television.
This is the music of research! We do not know what it is! We fear it! We should fear it! Science is not cool!
A banging broom from below joined the screaming of the freshers. The bedroom door remained closed. I dug myself further beneath the bed to avoid a stampede. I kept my eyes to the floor to avoid going insane.
Now you understand! Now you are one with science! It is time! It is time for the induction into the final university!
The studio audience cheered from the television. The screams of the freshers grew and grew. All I could smell was gunpowder. Someone was standing on the top of the bed yelling at people to break the window. The girl who I lent my jacket to had fallen on the floor not far from me. Beneath the stampede, she couldn't get out. The world existed in complete, deafening chaos. And then, it stopped. Everything had suddenly gone silent. All I could hear was the gentle static buzz from the television. The jacket girl was gone. Everyone was gone. Outside, the fire escape gently creaked in the wind. I tried to keep my eyes glued to the floor. I tried waiting all of it out, but eventually I couldn't help but satisfy my curiosity. I looked toward the mirror and stifled another scream. The lecture hall on the television was now full. Among the note-taking students sat drunk and underdressed and terrified freshers. The camera focused on their scared faces. The studio audience reacted with joyous laughter. Among the hall of scared youth, the gray skins from the kitchen sat. They were all beaming with unbridled joy.
Is there anyone missing in attendance?
Professor Egghead screamed.
No one is hiding from their research duties, are they?
The moment the Egghead looked into the camera, I forced my face back to the floor.
Hello? Is someone missing?
The Egghead said softly.
Ah, well, if someone is missing, they will be found eventually. They are always found. In the world of research, there are only entryways. There are no exits. No one can escape the company of Professor Egghead.
The studio audience rewarded this with another round of applause, but the clapping eventually died down. By the time I looked back at the television, the screen had gone dark. I stared at it for a minute or two and tried to make sense of what had just happened, but no explanation presented itself. Once I was sure the room was empty, I crawled out of my hiding spot and immediately went for the television. I turned it off. I also unplugged all the cables for good measure. The whole apartment was empty. All that was left of the visitors was a sea of sweaty shoes and a couple of coats. I tried convincing myself that there was no conceivable way a television could suck in a room full of people, but my mind refused to be rational. I took a quick gulp of some tequila, and it calmed me somewhat. But I knew what I really had to do was go home. I fished my coat out of the pile, dug out my shoes, and was ready to leave. Just as I was about to open the door, however, there was a loud knock. "Police, open up!" I backed off from the door. Very quickly, my mind went through the possible outcomes of a situation. There was no reasonable explanation for my attendance of the party. and there definitely wasn't any reasonable explanation for what had happened at said party. With the amount of alcohol in my bloodstream, I knew I couldn't talk my way past the cops. I didn't trust myself not to slur my words, but I still had some faith in my sense of balance. Leaving behind a gruff-voiced officer banging on the door, I made my way back to the bedroom and opened the window. My landing from the fire escape wasn't very graceful, and I sprained my ankle running back home. But I made it out. I don't understand what happened to all of those freshers. I can't comprehend what this egghead creature wants. But I managed to make it out of that apartment alive. I made it out alive. Yet as the hours pass, I'm starting to realize that I didn't make it out unscathed. I feel ill. With every passing minute, I feel less and less comfortable in my skin. It's as if I'm not alone. It's as if the egghead had somehow clung onto my mind past the fire escape from the party. When I close my eyes, I can hear him. I can hear him with undeniable clarity.
No one can escape the company of Professor Egghead.
I have a tendency of stumbling into places I don't belong. But after tonight, I think I've learned my lesson. If you ever get invited for the viewing of some mysterious tape, stay as far away as you can. Stay as far away as you can, because once Professor Egghead notices you, there is no escape.